Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Brent Henry, and I'm a partner in the healthcare section here at Mintz. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to what I think will be a fascinating presentation and discussion today. The future of health and wellness is in your gut is being presented to us by our client Builders VC and one of its portfolio companies, Fitbiomics. We have a lot to get to, so I'm just going to start by going straight to introducing our panel. Dr. Amit Mehta is the general partner of Builders. Jonathan Scheiman is the co-founder and CEO of Fitbiomics. And finally, Chris Mullin, former NBA star, manager and executive, and a Fitbiomics advisor. So Amit, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Brent. And good morning and good afternoon, depending on what time zone you are, to all our participants. And we appreciate you coming today. We're going to talk today about a subject that I think is fairly interesting to everybody around microbiome and microbiomics. So just as a background, my name is Amit Mehta, and I'm a general partner at Builders VC. We are a Silicon Valley predominantly tech fund where I lead the healthcare practice, and we look at technologies in healthcare that are revolutionizing the healthcare system and utilizing technology to make healthcare more efficient. My background stems from being a physician, training in minimally invasive image-guided surgery, and then a founder of a healthcare IT company that operates globally in the clinical trial space, and bringing that advantage to investing at Builders. I'm very pleased to introduce the panelists here with me today, Jonathan and Chris. And I'd like to thank them first for graciously giving us the time to talk about this burgeoning field, which from our perspective at Builders as an investor into Jonathan's company is at the intersection of healthcare and consumer healthcare revolving around the microbiome. Part of our thesis in healthcare at Builders is understanding and supporting personalized medicine companies in the revolution around genomics and proteomics, metagenomics, and microbiome is one of those innovations at the center of this thesis that is growing rapidly. And so to that extent, let me introduce both the panelists, and I'm going to do the introduction because they often do not do themselves justice in how great they are. So I'm going to do that for them and then let them add in anything that I leave out. Jonathan Scheiman received his doctorate in biomedical science from NYU and then did a research fellowship at Harvard Medical School's Weiss Institute of Biologically Inspired Engineering. That means he's really smart. Worked on transformative sequencing technologies and programmable cellular engineering, which now leads to what is his current passion of developing next generation performance probiotics with his company Fitbiomics. He really, in my opinion, brings a unique vantage point as a CEO in this space because he played Division I college basketball at St. John's University and then coached inner city public high school basketball. And that gives him insight into, from my perspective as an investor, into true product market fit from a person who has a really deep understanding of the science and is a leader in this field. Chris Mullin probably needs no introduction. He's a former basketball player, executive, and coach, two-time Olympic gold medalist as a member of the 1992 Olympic basketball team, the Dream Team. He's been selected as one of the 50 greatest basketball players of all time. He's played in the NBA from 1985 to 2001 as a seventh pick of the Golden State Warriors in the first round of the 85 draft pick. And then he served as a special advisor to the Sacramento Kings and the general manager of the Golden State Warriors. So the format that I'd like to employ today is I'm going to ask Jonathan to just for 10 or 15 minutes go over microbiome, just the science of what is involved so that people can get at least up to speed on an understanding of what it is, what specifically the microbiome is, why it's relevant, and where it's going, both as an industry, as a science discipline, and for the investors on the phone, where to focus efforts. So Jonathan, take it away.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that introduction. So as I said, I'll just kind of, give a little bit background on, myself, the state of the art in the industry, microbiomes, why it's relevant for, athletes, the NBA and beyond, and consumer performance, and, excited. I've never had to follow an introduction from one of the greatest players of all time before, so this will be a fun presentation. So we'll get to that. But, I always start with the beginning, why this is relevant for me. This was me, I think, back in 2002 at the NCAA tournament. I was a former ball player myself. I played at St. John's for 4 years. I was actually a walk-on. My goal was actually to be an NBA basketball player. These are the odds, I didn't make the NBA, so my backup was getting a PhD in molecular biology. And that's essentially how I became a scientist. But I think, obviously I've always been ingrained in this, and here's another current, warrior, all-time great. But, if you look at these odds as a scientist, I'm a big believer in form fits function. I'm a big believer in natural selection. And I think if you look at these elite athletes and these super performers, question for me kind of comes down to, well, what makes them unique? What makes them somewhat like superheroes and performing at this optimal level? And what are the implications and applications if we could understand this and really sort of understand what makes them unique, not just from an athletic perspective, but just from a human health and wellness perspective. So these are some of the things that drive me. This is also something interesting, again, to ties to the NBA. This is years ago where ESPN did an article about sort of new technological innovations in the NBA to enhance player performance. And he made this statement: the holy grail is sequencing the genome, which is pretty, to me was like a light bulb moment and exciting as a way to bridge these two industries together, genomics, biotechnology, and athletics. I think we all know that human genome was first published in 2003, took 15 years and $3 billion to do. Now we could sequence a genome in a couple of days for $1,000. So tremendous acceleration in terms of our ability to decode biological information. Human genomes are sort of the past right now. I think for us, we're really excited about the microbiome. And, this is a community of microorganisms in and on our body. We have trillions of bacteria predominantly in our gut that's greatly influencing our health, our wellness, and our functionality. And you can imagine, if you have trillions of bacteria in your gut, all with their own personal genomes and functionalities, they're greatly going to influence our functionality, our development, and our well-being with applications for performance and things of that nature as well. So I'll just give a couple of backgrounds, slides about the microbiome and transitioning to this. Again, trillions of microorganisms in our gut. What do they do? Over the past decade, really since this genomics era has sort of unveiled itself, what we've understood and understand is that, these microorganisms greatly influence energy metabolism, protein metabolism, neurology, and immunology, basically anything you could think of from a holistic health and functional standpoint. I think from my background in biomedicine, the status quo is, let's look at sort of diseased phenotypes or populations. What doesn't work? Can we correct that to promote health? But I think an interesting opportunity, and what Fitbiomics is taking an opposite approach. Let's look at the most fit people in the world. What does work in them? What's enriched helps them perform in an optimal manner? And for athletes, we think of, mental toughness, strength, recovery, endurance, and things of that nature. So again, how do all these microorganisms in our gut influence super performers, physiological demands? Can we learn from that? Can we decode that? Can we then translate that into nutritional modalities that benefit the masses? And here's just some things, more functional pathways that these bugs do: lactic acid metabolism, neurotransmitters, amino acid production, vitamin production. They interact with our immune system, not to mention influencing our diets and metabolism and breakdown of carbohydrates, proteins, and fat. So anything you could think of from a performance standpoint, the bugs in our gut and our microbiome does. This is something Fitbiomics is really excited to do is, again, let's work with elite athletes. Let's work with super performers, the most fit people in the world. Let's decode their biology, their microbiomes, to see what's unique and enriched in them. And then can we translate that into consumer products to benefit not just athletes, but the masses? And when we talk about bacteria, microbiomes, and beneficial bacteria, what we're really talking about are probiotics. So again, Fitbiomics decoding elite microbiomes to translate it to next generation probiotics. There's a lot of academic research going on in this field. We spent some time at Harvard doing this, published some papers, and we've also identified a lot of next generation probiotic microorganisms. And this goes from athlete variations on lactobacillus and bifidobacterium species to even new things in species altogether like Nella that eat lactic acid and promote endurance in preclinical studies. Of course, I think the name of the game in microbiome research and probiotics is not just sequencing and decoding understanding, it's actually translating that to something that's a tangible product and meaningful for broader communities. So again, Fitbiomics has spent a lot of time over the past few years taking our learnings from academia, translating that into actual next generation capsules that we've been prototyping and beta testing and actually getting ready to launch and commercialize. We've built sort of a community testing some of these unique proprietary athlete-derived strains. And we've been seeing all sorts of really cool information and feedback from consumers in terms of benefits, not only in just digestion, but also energy, quality of sleep, and recovery. And again, this notion of microbiomes, gut health, probiotics that are now improving consumer performance and health and well-being. So I'll just kind of finish with a couple of slides here. I spoke a little about the science, but just from a consumer opportunity, this is kind of interesting right now. If we look at the status quo and like active nutrition and what's really out there, it's kind of like, hey, let's either, eat a Chobani or drink a Gatorade with like nothing in between. So, really, I think there's a huge opportunity with microbiome research, and what Fitbiomics is pioneering is a new functional category of these next generation probiotics to support the active lifestyle of fitness-minded consumers. These are some of the numbers just in the US alone of how many active people there are. And again, working with and decoding the biology of superheroes, seeing what works in them and translating that into next generation probiotics that could benefit a lot of folks. And just in terms of the applications and who is this for, there's a wide range of folks, and it's not just elite athletes. Yes, Fitbiomics endeavors to work with elite athletes and support them and sort of learn a lot, but really we see this, as a wellness generation, and this constitutes fitness enthusiasts, this constitutes weekend warriors, health seekers. These are folks not necessarily in the NBA, but people that, are on Peloton or Equinox or CrossFit or road runners. We've learned a lot from consumer demographics and insights, people that are interested in our technology and our products. Half of the folks we work with exercise on a daily basis. Another 40% of them exercise 3 to 5 times a week. And their number one goal for this exercise is staying healthy and staying fit. So they're looking for nutritional modalities that are going to support their active lifestyles and help them be the best version of themselves. So I'll kind of wrap there. Recently, Fitbiomics is signed to announce that after years of this R&D and discoveries and publications and prototyping, beta testing, unveiling the world's first sort of athlete-derived probiotic and next generation probiotic. This is our consumer-facing brand and name and how we're translating technology into these capsules for consumer performance and health. Certainly the name and look is rooted in our discoveries and technology, but this is supposed to be, really bridging the gap, and using sort of microbiome technology to really disrupt consumer health and performance and really the evolution and the new frontier. And I'll just say, there's a huge opportunity in this space, and quite frankly, we're just getting started, and it's been a really exciting time.
So before we move into the fireside chat, I just want to recap a little bit just to make sure that the basis of understanding is there for all the participants. Tell us exactly, what is the microbiome? What exactly are we talking about here?
Yeah, so basically, when we talk about the microbiome, as human beings and organisms, we actually are as much bacteria as we are human. We have trillions of microorganisms and bacteria that live in and on our bodies. A majority of them reside in our gut, and they greatly influence our health and functionality. So this is an ecosystem of microorganisms and bacteria that drive everything from digestion to energy metabolism our immunity, our neurology. So it's really our innate microbial ecosystem that drives our functionality and health.
Great. And so how do you take that ecosystem and organisms that live in your small and your large bowel? What was the research that took that and ultimately now has translated for Fitbiomics as a company creating a pill? But how do you go from a bunch of bugs in your gut to a pill?
Yeah, that's a great question. It takes years and years of research, that's for sure, and hard work. So yeah, we spent a lot of time, again, I did my postdoctoral fellowship in George Church's lab at Harvard. And it was really there where we did some of our initial studies, recruiting athletes, mostly endurance athletes, marathon runners, ultramarathon runners, rowers, collecting biological samples to sort of see.
You collected poop? Just making.
Yeah, that's exactly. So, we look at samples that passage through our GI tract. Fun fact, around 60% of poop or stool is actually bacteria. So there's a lot of information of what's going on in our biology in those samples. We then extract genetic material so we could essentially get a snapshot of all the microorganisms in an athlete's gut, how it changes over time, how it compares to athletes by different sports and non-athletes. And once we obtain all that metagenomic information, we could go back to those samples and actually now select and purify probiotic candidates of interest that we further develop.
Okay, so you've collected the stool samples, you've analyzed them and found that the bacteria in the gut of elite athletes, NBA players, etc., is different than someone like me, non-athletic. What do you do with that information that ends up in a pill like Nella?
Yeah, so once we identify these probiotic candidates, and there's a lot that goes into it, again, big believer in form fits function. We identify all these probiotic candidates from metagenomic analysis. We then purify them. We then, work with sort of fermentation and manufacturing partners to scale them into freeze-dried food-grade material. We then could put them into supplements that we could then start testing, for different functional aspects, whether it's sort of energy, digestion, sleep, or recovery, or things of that nature.
Okay. The burning question, does it work?
I mean, well, we could ask Chris about that, but yeah, I think we have gained a lot of positive feedback. We've done some initial testing with around, 250 folks. We've given them sort of daily supplies of our Nella supplements, and we've asked them to provide us feedback on a whole range of functional benefits. And we're seeing tremendous positive feedback in terms of things of improved energy, improved quality of sleep, improved recovery, improved digestion. So, we're now in the process of initiating 2 clinical studies to further, get more proof to the pudding. But yeah, there's a lot of early indications that this is validating the technology.
Awesome, thanks. Good. Chris, you're on the spot now. So can you talk a little bit about your experiences from moving from college to the Olympics to professional NBA player to a GM regarding, talk to us about a little about training, practicing, nutrition. What did you do? How have things changed? Just give us a general overview as an elite athlete, what tools you've had, and then why this sort of excites you.
Yeah, well, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here. First and foremost, Jonathan, I met years ago, obviously without connection with St. John's, but I gotta say, one of the most unique individuals I've ever met in my life, because most former college basketball players either go into, if they're good enough, to the NBA or coaching or broadcasting, or I don't know anyone has gone on to be a scientist. So this guy is a unique individual, and just as you heard just now, his presentation, just incredibly smart, and his passion for this is what first and foremost grabbed me. We met when I went back to coach at St. John's. He actually took my stool, and that's how we kind of I got introduced to this product.
It's a unique bond, Chris.
Yeah, yeah. So going back, like, so when I entered St. John's 1981, quite a long time ago. So back then, the training was more, sit-ups, push-ups, you go for running the street, and basically play basketball. When I came to the NBA in 1985, I was drafted by the Warriors, as you mentioned, and we were still prehistoric to a degree. We were practicing at different sites each and every day, at high schools, YMCA's, that would vary each and every day. So the biggest breakthrough really for the NBA and the healthcare quality of play has been the addition of each and every team has these incredible practice facilities. Now it sounds kind of simple, but I'm talking about everything you need as far as taking care of your body. As Jonathan said, the biggest emphasis, that the biggest change has been rest and recovery with training. It used to be no pain, no gain. Right now it's, no pain. So now it's, pay, no pain, no gain is gone with. So now everything that the teams are trying to do is to preserve their athletes' bodies, not only for longevity, but for energy, and total health, so they can perform at the highest level. So to me, this product, and I've been on it for about probably 2 months now, and I'm still very active. I bike, I run, I swim, I golf. I do a lot of stuff. I live in California outdoors. And the biggest thing I've noticed is digestion and the nutrition. It encourages better nutrition, right? You can feel yourself digesting better. John mentioned rest. I've been sleeping much better and waking up and just going. And I've over the years, because of my extensive career, I've had hip surgery, I've had knee surgery. So I've rehabbed different parts of my body post-career to get back to being pain-free while maintaining my activity level. But this product, Nella, to me, has really, as John explained, it's very detailed scientifically, but from a normal brain, not like John's, I can really feel my body just healthier. And I think for me at 57, the digestion part is what I've noticed. So, from an athletic standpoint, I think this is on the cutting edge because of all the changes in pro sports, getting back to rest, recovery, maintaining your energy level. For the people that don't know, especially the NBA, the schedule is extensive, and it's as much travel and recovering from that game before, like I was mentioned earlier to you guys. I still do the Warriors TV, so they play today in Miami, tomorrow in Tampa Bay, Sunday in Atlanta. So the biggest challenge, one of the biggest challenges, is getting from game to game and maintaining that energy level, right, through nutrition and digestion. So it's a long-winded, but that's where the biggest advances have come for professional athletes. It's incredible the amount of time they put into recovery, taking care of their injuries, and nutrition. That's been the biggest change in the NBA, as I mentioned, with the practice facilities. And then, it sounds silly, but the way they travel. So the two biggest things were the practice facilities and the private planes. Now, with the private planes, it's not just travel. It's the ability to have your own food on the plane, the ability to get treatment on the plane as you go into that next city. So that's all about recovery. And Nella really encompasses all those things in one pill: rest, recovery, nutrition, and digestion. And they're all tied together. So for me at 57, I'm like, man, if I had this when I played a long time anyway. But the fact that I would have felt better, it was a lot of days. And So that's where I get run down, and you know, at least once a year I would get the flu, at least, just from being run down from traveling through airports, all those things. So this product, Nella, encompasses all those things that I see the big changes in the NBA that have happened over the last 30 years. This is something I'm introducing to all my friends, both active and retired players, because of the way it's helped me in the last 2 months. So I think it's going to be groundbreaking, and it's forward thinking, because, and from a competitive standpoint, I was telling Jonathan this, any team that can find something that does that for their athletes, that's a huge advantage. And at the NBA level, that's exactly what they're looking for. And
yeah, that's an segue there for Jonathan. Like, Jonathan, when you hear Chris talk about how digestion and health and wellness is important in the NBA, give us some perspective on what you think, how the microbiome technology is relevant for the NBA and how it can help someone's favorite team. Like, how do they actually utilize something this in the NBA?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking myself, this is kind of meta, but if we had microbiome technologies and Nella back when I was at St. John's, maybe I never would have become a scientist. Maybe I would have stuck with basketball. So I don't know. I guess everything happens for a reason. I told you before this, we got to get the New York Knicks some help. I grew up a Knicks fan, so really Fitbiomics was built to help sort of the New York teams. But no, I listen, I think that for years, a lot of times when we look at sort of athletes and we look at sort of health and nutrition, a lot of times like, what do athletes wear, right? Or what do athletes like eat, or, endorsements. But I think we haven't really spent a lot of time on what's actually going on in athletes and elite performers' biology in their body. What are sort of these microorganisms that are helping them with sleep, neurotransmitter production, breaking down proteins, absorbing amino acids and vitamins. And I think that understanding that, knowing what works, and then translating that into something that's easy and practical, because if you look at microbiome and metagenomics, you're talking about trillions of organisms and how many gigabytes of like genomic information. But really the thing is, let's take all that information, learn from it, and now put into something that's practical, not just for NBA athletes, but for consumers. So the main mantra is gut health really is associated with holistic health. Our microorganisms can be translated into next-gen probiotics.
There's a question here from the audience. Let me just take a couple of these. One is, are there any sample supplies for today's attendees?
Yeah, I mean, I would encourage everyone to go to nellaprobiotics.com and check it out for yourself. But yeah, we'd love to connect with anyone on this call and follow up. Maybe we could communicate via email, and we'd love to get Nella to everyone on this call.
Great. Okay, there's a question from the audience here. How are engineered probiotics regulated in the NBA or in professional athletics? Would it be treated like using steroids, some of which are naturally occurring in the human body too?
So the first thing to mention is that, and I'll let Chris speak about new implementations into the NBA. So these actually aren't engineered. Again, this big believer in form fits function. Our microbiomes are sort of naturally shaped by our diet, our geography, antibiotic usage, environmental exposure, physical activity. So again, form fits function. Through those processes and training and diet, what are these sort of probiotics that are naturally occurring and thriving in the gut of these elite athletes? Almost sort of what is being selected for. We identify that, and then we sort of, translate that and turn those into probiotics. So these aren't engineered. These are all sort of naturally occurring microorganisms that are in the microbiomes of these elite athletes.
Okay. And Chris, I'm going to ask you just sort of give us a little bit of overview of how the NBA implements new technology for player performance and health, shooting, recovery, analytics. I mean, how does that happen in an organization like the NBA? And is Nella something that if a player just wants to start taking it, they can take it and it's not regulated? How does that all work?
Yeah, so that's a great great question. That there's been a huge shift just from that word used, player performance. So when I came into the NBA, we had a trainer, one person that would tape our ankles and give us ice bags. That was basically what they did. Maybe some modalities to take care of your swelling, things like that. But now teams hire player performance, and that entails everything from weight training to stretching to recovery. Each team and the NBA in general has emphasized they have sleep experts. So that's a huge factor too. They've changed their travel schedules. I mentioned a little earlier. Most teams back in the day, if you were on the road, right after the game, you would fly out to get to the next city, right? Because you had your own plane. Now, most teams stay in that city strictly just to get a good night's sleep. So that's a big shift. That's a huge difference. And especially this year, dealing with the pandemic, most teams opt in season to take a day off than to practice. This is a huge difference. You've heard the term load management, where they're watching players' minutes. You saw Steph Curry, all the star players back in the day. I think I led the league 3 years in a row in minutes, over 40 minutes per game, which I loved. I never wanted to come out of the game, but long term, yeah, I had my hip fix and my knee fix and things like that. So they're all long term effects to that. So these player performance staffs, yeah, they would look at what they're putting in their body. Nella would, I think there's an NSA stamp similar to the Olympics. There's substances that are banned, right, throughout the Olympic Committee. So it's a simple seal of approval. But to me, and I'm introducing to all the teams just because of what I believe in it. But as far as the player performance, the shift has been in nutrition, rest and recovery, and then what ties that together is the digestion of what you put in your body. It's amazing. So all the stuff John talked about scientifically, a lot of it I don't understand, but for my body I do understand. So athletes understand their bodies better than ever now, and they know exactly what they're putting in their bodies. Because let's be real. These guys can make contract $200 million. So their body is everything, and that's how the organizations look at it. That's their investment. Anything they can do to keep it, running at the highest level and have an advantage over their opponent is a huge factor. So the player performance, of course, they would look at it, the product, but when they see what it does, it ties in perfectly of their goals.
Yeah. And I'll just add to that. Chris brought up a good point about sort of obviously with Fitbiomics, when we make our discoveries, we work from a fermentation and manufacturing standpoint to work with facilities that are GMP compliant. So meet all those specifications, good manufacturing practices. We do a tremendous amount of safety, quality control assessment, purity testing. We then also, Chris mentioned, this is, performance sort of advanced substances. There's a list of those. So Nella has been tested for informed choice for sport to be cleared of all those. So yes, there's a tremendous amount. You go from metagenomics, and sort of translation, but now practical commercialization, there's a ton that goes into that to ensure these things are safe and, ready to be used and consumed by athletes.
John, there's a question from the audience. What's the targeted age range for Nella?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think that for us going into this, from a consumer standpoint and a wellness generation, I think, we tend to think of this as like millennial or millennial adjacent. So, maybe there's, Gen Zs. But actually, I think we're learning a lot, and Chris was speaking to this, you have folks, we have high performance competitive athletes, triathletes, cyclists, swimmers that are benefiting from this. But we also have people that are maybe former athletes or retired or just committed competitors that are also benefiting. So I think there's a wide range of broad applications. I also just want to clarify in terms of the products and just the microbiome technology in general, we really are just scratching the surface. Fitbiomics, we're developing two products. One is this first version, of Nella, which is really athlete-derived variants of lactobacillus. Lactobacillus traditionally come from baby poop, food, cheese, soil, animals. Again, form fits function. We're looking for natural strain variants that work and thrive in elite athletes. And this is for gut health applications. We're also developing our Vianella strain, which is really, it eats lactic acid metabolism, lactic acid, and in preclinical settings promotes endurance. That's what we're focusing on to start. But the more microbiomes and diversity that you decode from a performance perspective, our goal is to have dozens to hundreds of these next-gen probiotics for different functional applications. So that was a very long-winded response and answer, but I guess what I'm trying to say is with the technology, it's ever evolving. And the more decoding and sequencing we do, the more we discover and the more potential benefits there are outside of even athletics.
So to that point, John, there's a question from the audience, and this is relevant to what you just said in terms of you're developing out multiple strains and multiple. If the probiotics are naturally occurring, then are you able to secure IP and patents around the technology? I mean, can you speak and address sort of how copycats and what kind of defenses a company has to have to address competition?
Yeah, so obviously we're developing our technology. We've filed IP. We have patents for some of those discoveries, the strains themselves, the formulations of those strains, the applicational use of those strains. There's a lot that goes into that. Obviously, as you further build out clinical trials, so the results of those. But I think, Perez, I was talking to Chris about this the other day. We're not a therapeutics company. We're not treating disease. We're focused on human potential, health and wellness. So part of this is the technology build out and the IP, but the other part is also, building the team, finding the right partners and the partnerships. Like everyone has a game plan, before the game, but it's about executing that. And I think for Fitbiomics, we're trying to bridge the gap between that cutting edge technology and IP, but also sort of consumer, awareness and brand development and partnerships within the athletic community. So it's a combination of all that.
Okay. I just want to go back to the more sciencey part of this just for a second. Can you just talk to us a little bit about where are we in the cycle of development of microbiome? I mean, obviously it's early, but you've been a scientist in a lab in the media, we've not heard about it, but has this been going on for 30 years, or is this in the last 1 year we figured out that there's bacteria in your gut because Jonathan started looking at stool samples, or where are we in the cycle of development? Are we version 1.0 or version 10.0?
I mean, I think we're still in the early days, but I think the important thing is, so if you look at DNA structure and, all that, you're talking about something like, over, half a century ago. If you look at next generation sequencing, again, to state this, the first human genome sequence was published in 2003. And that was supposed to usher in the dawn of the genomics era. It took 15 years and $3 billion. We can now sequence human genomes for around $1,000 in a couple of days. So the acceleration of discovery is just profoundly changed in the past decade. Next generation sequencing came to the forefront probably around 2008. The NIH had a human microbiome project from 2008 to 2012 where we really learned a lot. But I think now, you're talking about within the last 5 years, there's been huge acceleration. I think we're still in the early days. We're developing a couple of products. There's a ton of microbiome companies out there. I mean, I think you're only going to see orders of magnitude increase in the coming, 5, to 10 years.
And what's the timing for the cycle of development? If you find a new bacteria or you're working on a strain, to go from discovering that to getting a pill, how long does that take? And then the second part of that question is, can you put all these things in one pill, or do you have to take 10 pills?
Yeah, so science, R&D, technology, it takes time. I mean, that's just the reality of it. I could tell you, we did our first study with the, Boston Marathon when I was at Harvard back in April 2015. So you're talking about, we're now, I guess, 6 years since then. Fitbiomics spun out of Harvard, around 3 years ago. So if you look at that, there's a lot of R&D, there's a lot of sort of like platform technology build out, there's a lot of discovery, then there's translating. That's also a huge bottleneck for microbiome companies. You discover a bug, but can you scale it to industrial levels and standards? So, you're talking about probably a couple of years for that, then beta testing, then clinicals. So think about that over the last 3 to 6 years, what we've done just to get to this point. And then I forgot the second part of your question.
Am I going to be taking 20 pills in the future, or I can take one and it's one magic pill?
Well, so I guess there's no magic involved. It's all science and technology in a capsule. But what I would say is the goal is if you identify microorganisms that have different functional benefits, whether that's carbohydrate digestion, protein digestion, lactic acid metabolism, GABA neurotransmitter production for sleep, you could then create, sort of cocktails of these next-gen probiotics that you could put into one supplement, or you could sort of mix and match them. It could get more personalized. Different athletes or consumers want different functional benefits. So the more discoveries you make, the more you could personalize it and put them all into a supplement. And it moves beyond supplements too. These are living microorganisms, but obviously they go to food and beverage innovation opportunities as well.
Okay. And to that point where you just mentioned that, so tell me, how do you quantify the benefits of a probiotic product?
Yeah, this is crazy, man. This is, all I wanted to do was talk basketball, but I guess we got Chris on the call, so he's got to talk the basketball, and I got to talk the science. But no, I think it's interesting for us. What are we doing, sort of, to accelerate, the technology and the progress? And for us, again, safety, quality, development. I mentioned we did we had prototype capsules. We did a beta test. Where we worked with 250 people, signed consent forms. We gave them a 2-week supply of these probiotics to take on a daily basis. They filled out surveys, baseline in the middle and after, asked them all sorts of questions regarding to sleep, energy, digestion. So it's almost like a broad-based approach to kind of get consumer insights and benefits, learn what those initial functional implications are. For us, what we've seen is digestion, sleep, energy recovery, and then we could then focus and hone in on those with actual, clinical trials that we're working on with professional and collegiate teams. So it's a process from discovery, development, beta test, QC, safety, beta testing to clinicals, and obviously you throw commercialization in there as well.
Okay, Chris, a question for you. As you're a former player, coach. How hard is it to get an NBA player to take something like this? I mean, for probiotic companies or new technology companies developing athlete-focused products, I mean, is it coach says take the pill and the player will take it, or is it are the players asking for scientific vigor and rigor and reading the studies? I mean, tell me a little bit about how new things like this are adopted at the player level.
Yeah, as Jonathan stated, a lot of it is introduction, and ultimately how it makes them feel, how it makes them perform. Another thing that has happened in pro sports, you talk about technology, and earlier I mentioned about load management, watching the players, not only the minutes they play in the game, how much they practice, and all geared towards, of course, rest and recovery. But they have wearables. They so they don't guess how many minutes you should play. They have analytic data that they look at because they have wearables that they can tell the force, how much torque they're putting on their body in practice. Everything they do is data driven with analytics and technology. So science is part of that as well, with nutrition and their diets, and it's all individually for each. So now you used to go have a team meal and you had steak or fish. Now every meal is catered to that individual person through science and technology. That's a huge difference in the NBA. I'm not that up on the other sports. I'm sure they do it though. So they're not guessing at minutes played, what rest you need, what your diet should be. This is all scientific and technology driven, which again, with Nella, all the things they're trying to accomplish, I've seen Nella accomplish those goals. It'll be something that you add to your training regimen, right? You mentioned the player performance team, so it's not the coach. Coach has nothing to do with this. Is like a whole different branch of the organization. This is strictly health and wellness of the individual player. And as far as introducing it, it'll be much like, like Jonathan mentioned, the drinks they use, all the different products that are out there. It's about getting it into the right hands, and then the product speaking for itself in its effectiveness. And I've seen it personally, and that's why, and I think too, Jonathan, I mentioned this to him, a lot of the owners of these pro sports teams are Silicon Valley, VCs, things like that. And again, it gets down to competition. They're looking for that edge. And to me, Nella fits energy, nutrition, rest and recovery. That's where the focus has gone. These professional athletes, they're all tremendous athletes. If you to walk into a weight room, you're not going to see big barbells and dumbbells like we did in the 80s. It's all performance driven, more bands and stretching, very specific for that individual. So to me, I said earlier, cutting edge moving forward, this is the product to me that fits what pro athletes are trying to do to their bodies.
Sure. So it sounds like, there's a trend here from one fits all to very tailored precision treatment, training, function around the player. So I'd love to, we're going to try to end a little early so people can, in the central time, some lunch, etc. But Jonathan, let's close here with just give us some hope and insight into where the microbiome field is going. Where are we going to be in 3 years, 5 years, 20 years? What do we look forward to? Are you going to can I play in the NBA someday?
If we achieve that, then we're just, hey, there's nothing else left to do. But I think Chris really, really hit it on the head. And with any technology, with any science R&D, the best thing is that it continuously evolves, and we're continuously learning. And I talk about the beginning. You look at, and Chris, I think it's just amazing, the evolution and where we were then and where we are now. You mentioned pain and gain and like barbells and stuff. Right now, if you look at active nutrition, it's just like, hey, electrolytes or whey protein, right? And like, how many versions of those do you have that you could formulate? Or like, even if you look at current probiotics, these have been around for decades, right? So there's no real innovation from just the ingredients or what we're sort of consuming that can help us optimize our body. So, version 1.0 is, all right, let's go to the source. Let's just look for alternatives to the status quo. Let's use metagenomics technology to find those alternatives. And that's what Nella is. Then you talk about version 2.0, 3.0, or downstream. You work with as many diverse beneficial phenotypes as possible. At Harvard, we worked with runners and rowers, endurance athletes. But what if you go to like super performers in every functional category? What's going on in their body? How does their body interact with diet? And now you have a whole slew of these next-gen probiotics for strength, mental toughness, recovery, endurance, digestion. And now you could start to put together unique and personalized formulations for different people. And by the way, it's not just about athletic performance. It is about health and wellness. It's about the human potential. So then you could start having different applications. So, I think everyone should be excited about this field because there's tremendous opportunity to be a force for good for society. And we're just scratching the surface. So, that's what I would say.
I would just add the other part, and this is not as recent, but focus in functional athletes, high level athletes, is core strength, right? That's if you don't have core strength, at some point you're going to break down. Same with gut health. Gut health is the center of all and now more than ever, your immunity system. right? We all know that. And I think this past year, we've all learned a lot of those things that we just took for granted, like, how are you feeling? These are like big time life questions. So just your, like Jonathan said, the professional athletes, that's one target. But I think that now we all have a better appreciation of just our overall health and immune system.
Appreciate it. Well, I want to thank both of you for spending the time with us. I think this microbiome is a fascinating area, and why, as an investor, we've put money into Fitbiomics. We're excited and engaged, and we think this is going to be a huge category. Chris, your insight's invaluable and incredible to see it from the inside, and Jonathan, science perspective. We hope to see you at our next webinar. I'll turn it over to Brent. And
thank you, Amit. And thank you all for joining us today. And as Amit said, if you have any further questions, you could reach out to Fitbiomics directly or to Amit to learn a little bit more about Builders VC. So once again, thank you for taking the time out of your busy day, and we hope to see you next time on a Mintz event.